finally watched Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, and it was the end of a journey. A long, messy, poorly planned journey. Let's recap. These are just my opinions on the Star Wars films. The Force Awakens started a new trilogy by soft rebooting A New Hope by essentially redoing that movie's plot with different people. I gave it a favorable review because it needed to be a fun movie after the prequel movies. A series of films that failed utterly because of horrible writing and directing. While The Force Awakens had a recycled plot, the actors had good chemistry, and I wanted to see where these characters would go. Then The Last Jedi happened. A bloated mess of subplots that didn't amount to anything despite some interesting attempts at character development for Rey, Kylo Ren, and Luke Skywalker. Those few good moments are juxtaposed by a subplot with a pointless conflict, a subplot that is completely pointless, and really bad comedy. And now we come to The Rise of Skywalker. This movie is a mess, and it is fascinating. There are some good bits, mostly stuff with Rey and Kylo Ren again, but the rest of the movie is tons of things happening in rapid succession to keep you from thinking about something for too long. The pacing at the beginning of the film reminded me of an episode of Family Guy from a more recent season. Scenes start and then just shift abruptly to different scenes with different tones. I half expected to hear an orchestrated transition song between each scene. The humor early on is so bad. Just like in The Last Jedi, this movie tries to mimic the types of humor from the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and it still does not fit the tone. The movie even rips off the Lightspeed jump sequence from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. There is this horribly unfunny scene where Kylo Ren has his helmet repaired with noticeable red cracks and talks to a boardroom of generals who try to awkwardly brush off how bad the helmet looks. Then he violently chokes someone. So much stuff is crammed into this movie. A lot of it is dumb. We have inconsistencies, plot conveniences, and retcons that the movie just tries to speed through without you noticing. I'm going to get into spoilers now. If you want to avoid spoilers, skip to this time code. Emperor Palpatine is back as the villain after being thrown down a shaft in a space station that exploded. Darth Maul fell in a shaft after being bisected, but came back in the Clone Wars, so I'm used to that nonsense. Palpatine's inclusion in this movie is tied to so many preposterous elements. He was mostly brought in as a villain of this movie because Snoke died in the last movie and was a non-character, and Kylo Ren wasn't a competent enough villain to really rule the Empire on his own. One of the dumbest plot points in this movie is that zombie Palpatine has a fleet of Star Destroyers that pop out of the ground of the planet with the unfortunate name. I thought that was a dream sequence because of how ridiculous it looked. But no, Palpatine just has these hundreds of fully manned Star Destroyers. Where did all those hundreds of warships and thousands of people come from? Palpatine apparently made Snoke, the villain that died in the last movie. There are several Snokes in a tank in the first scene, like the Witches 5 and Sailor Moon Crystal. It doesn't matter that they're there, they're just there. The Star Destroyers have Death Star lasers too. Let's pause on that. The Death Star, which is a planet-destroying weapon the size of a moon, could be made into a spaceship-mounted cannon. It took the Empire 20 years to build the first Death Star, and now Palpatine just has hundreds of these cannons in 30 years. Still, we can't escape planet-destroying lasers in this creatively bankrupt series. The Death Star or something similar has been a set piece in 6 Star Wars movies. So Rey is Palpatine's granddaughter, which is why she has strong force powers, and he wants her to succeed him as Sith Empress. Let's pause on that. At what point in time did Palpatine have a child with a lady? I've sat through the prequels and most of the Clone Wars cartoons, and there isn't a Mrs. Palpatine.
If you'd made up your mind 5 seconds earlier, we could have ruled the galaxy, and maybe I could have gotten laid one more time before I died.
Why didn't one of his children succeed him? Rey's parents give her up to live in hiding and die protecting her from the evil wizard. If that sounds like Harry Potter, that's because it does. But in space! When the movie revealed that Rey was a Palpatine, I kept hearing Dumbledore's quote from the end of Chamber of Secrets in my head for the rest of the movie, waiting for someone to say something similar.
It is not our abilities that show what we truly are. It is our choices.
I mean, it fits thematically. The movie even ends with Rey arriving on Tatooine to bury Luke and Leia's lightsabers and looking at the twin suns. This doesn't make sense for a few reasons. 1. Leia has no attachment to this place. 2. Luke wanted to leave Tatooine as fast as he could. And 3. Rey is only there because this is where the saga started. The whole saga looks like a snake swallowing its own tail. A big problem is that The Rise of Skywalker mirrors Return of the Jedi. After a lot of heat was placed on The Force Awakens for being so similar to A New Hope, they decided to end this trilogy like they ended the first trilogy, with an evil emperor tempting the hero to the dark side by threatening to kill all of their friends engaged in a space battle. It's like poetry, it rhymes, I guess. I didn't like The Last Jedi that much, but I respected it for trying to tell its own story instead of rehashing the things we know. The only movie in this whole slapdash saga that really stands out with the most distinction is The Empire Strikes Back, and none of the follow-up films come close to it in quality. Star Wars seems to be forever chained to the legacy of the original trilogy and reminding us of all those memorable bits while barely making anything new and memorable after that. Looking back at the movies in the new trilogy, the parts where I felt the most emotion were related to the original cast. It is a shame because the new cast had so much potential but were underutilized. Adam Driver is a great actor, and Daisy Ridley is really charismatic. The Rise of Skywalker hammers in that aside from Rey and Kylo, most of the cast didn't do much to impact the flimsy overarching story or have arcs of their own. Rose was a major character in The Last Jedi, but she is unfairly shafted for characters that aren't developed and lose importance once their scenes are over. It seems that no one had an idea what to do with this trilogy, and Disney banked on the Star Wars name alone without planning a story to tell. The Rise of Skywalker is a mess, but I didn't hate it. I do not recommend the movie unless you want to see the end of the trilogy, and this trilogy sadly is largely a display of wasted potential. Thankfully, it looks like Disney is trying new things with Star Wars on streaming. Thank you so much for watching, I'll see you all next time.